Welcome back to the Early Weigh-In Podcast. And this Saturday is UFC 256, Deiveson Figueiredo versus Brandon Moreno for the UFC's Flyweight Championship. Both of these guys making quick turnarounds after looking relatively good, man, on UFC 255. I know we lost a couple fights here. Now we're down to, I think it's back up to 11 with Leticia Torres getting a newcomer possibly. We did throw that fight out. We're not going to break that one down. So just 10 fights going forward for us here.
Yeah, I'm actually really looking forward to it. As far as cards recently have gone, this is definitely the most stacked one up until this point. I think after next week, it won't hold that title anymore. Right. But as of right now, man, this is a really exciting card, and I hope that it stays together.
Absolutely, man. We feel like we got some good reads coming off a +6 unit night where we called it, man. We said we were getting back on track, and hopefully success continues, man. But going into the first fight to kick us off, it's a pretty low-level fight here. We have Chase Hooper, who's 9-1, fighting Peter Barrett, who's 11-4. This is taking place in the featherweight division. Man, in my opinion, maybe it's just because it's 2020, but Chase Hooper should never be a -400 favorite over any professional fighter. This guy's as green as it comes. On the mat, this guy's got very good jiu-jitsu. He is a brown belt on the feet. Got a nice little head kick, a good right hand. But he is an absolute work in progress on the feet. He's got tall man defense, and his chin's held together because he eats some punches before he can finally get this fight to the mat. He lacks the wrestling ability to do that sometimes, and thank goodness he's got Peter Barrett, who's probably just got an absence of a ground game. Zalal kind of exposed that, but like I said, it's a low-level fight. If Chase Hooper actually does get it down to the mat, I could see him possibly, getting it done inside the distance. Straight dog or pass for me, but Peter doesn't show me enough to even pull it on. I'm probably going to pass altogether.
I couldn't agree more. As far as Chase Hooper being the almost 4-1 favorite, it's kind of ridiculous. That being said, last week we saw Jordan Levitt, who is also a strictly ground guy, and he was a -400, and he went out there and slammed the dude into oblivion. Nice. Yeah. So, Chase Hooper, amateurish striking game. I'm definitely with you. He is an IBJJF Pan Am champion, and his ground game is amazing. Now, that being said, he kind of struggles, just like Mackenzie Dern, in getting the fight to the ground. He lacks that wrestling ability to shoot for the more technical takedowns. And one thing that I think, I'm not sure if it'll play a part in this fight, but I do think that it will play a part in his future in the UFC, is he's not a man yet.
Right.
I don't really, and that's kind of disrespectful to say, but he lacks that man strength, and you can tell in the way his body's built. He's very much string beanie, and I'm excited to see him move forward. But at 21 years old, he's got a lot of developing to do, not only in his game but in his body, and that's something that I could really see playing a factor. I don't think that Peter Barrett's going to be the one to exploit that, but he is a veteran of the sport. He's training at Lausanne MMA in Massachusetts with our boy Randy Costa, and he did show durability in the Yusuf Zalal fight. Yusuf touched him up, let's be honest, and I think if Yusuf had the ending it mindset, I think that he could have gotten
any sense of urgency.
I think he really could have gotten Barrett out of there earlier. Barrett's 34 years old. That's a 13-year difference between the two. Barrett sitting at a +315, I'd almost want to play him more because of Chase Hooper not having that well-rounded game. But even with that being said, Peter Barrett just isn't somebody that I'm going to be laying the chalk on no matter what in any fight. So I think officially I'll go with Chase Hooper. The odds should be much closer, but I'm definitely leaning towards him.
Yeah, I'm with you. On the record, Chase Hooper for sure. This is a guy that probably should have got a developmental deal, or maybe keep him in LFA, develop him a little bit, let him get some skills underneath his belt, because there's not very many winnable fights in the featherweight division for him.
Correct. Moving on to our next fight, we go to the heavyweight division, where the polar bear, Sergey Spivak, who is 11-2, faces the mountain, Jared Vandera, who is 11-4. Sergey Spivak was originally scheduled to fight Tom Aspinall, and he's really lucky that he got this opponent change, because Aspinall is going to be a monster against anybody. Spivak, he has a wrestling heavy attack, and he comes from a combat sambo background, and I don't see him changing that up anytime soon. In his UFC career, he is 2-2, beating Carlos Felipe by decision and tied to Avasa by arm triangle choke. In his losses, he's lost to Marcin Tybura and Walt Harris. Those are two established heavyweights who, especially with a 25-year-old heavyweight, I'm not.
I give him the pass.
Right. I allow it to happen, especially first round with Walt Harris. Anybody's in your debut, anybody's bound to get KO'd. So Sergey, there's a pretty clear path to victory for him. He's going to look for the takedown and look to just be top heavy, eventually look for the sub, but really just look to control the positions and wear on Vandera. Vandera, to be honest with you, I'm not too impressed with him. He got a good opponent in Harry Hunsucker in the contender series where he was able to get him out in the first round, but there were some times where Hunsucker was landing some good shots and looked okay in that bout. Vandera, his record at 11-4 is already kind of suspect, but then you look at his amateur record, which was 5-4, and then any time that he's competed against like the higher level competition, like in LFA, he's 0-3 in LFA. Yeah. So we see him time and time again not being able to step up to that competition, and I think we're going to see the exact same thing in the Spivak fight. And I think that that's probably why we see the line movement. Sergey Spivak opened at a -145 and has since been bet to a -235. And reasonably so, because if I would have gotten Spivak at -145, I really would have laid the chalk on him.
Man, yeah, I'm with you. I would have loved to have been all over that opening line. And I don't know what it is about Spivak. Both Aspinall and Vandera, after his win on the Contender Series, they're calling Sergey Spivak out. And, that's a prospect that I think has a lot of potential and a lot of room to grow in the UFC. Not one Jared, in my opinion, needs to be calling out. Like you said, with his Sambo background, man, he's a rare heavyweight. He gives you something else other than the striking to think about. And then when you're a heavyweight, you already have that power, man. So when you throw in the thought of the takedown, your strikes open up so much. And I think that's why we've seen Sergey have a ton of success. When this guy gets in the clinch game, he's got so many ways to get it to the mat, dragging you, just throwing you to the mat. And at 25, he's already been in there with 2 top 10 heavyweights, regardless of loss. Man, great. His striking is a work in progress, but on the other side is, like you said, a guy that just doesn't impress me, as a guy that's slow on the feet, and a guy that I told you earlier in the week reminds us of Josh Parisian, man. Mm-hmm. And he's slow on the feet, very going to be hittable. If he doesn't get you out of there in the first round, I guarantee you the cardio will fade. And he's fought tomato cans, and anytime he's taken a step up, he loses, man. We make a living off of fading these new coming heavyweights, man. I wish somehow they would have been given Vandera the favorite here, and so we could have taken the dog on Spivak or something. But I think everybody's seeing what we see, man, as a low level on Jared Vandera. If he can't get those leg kicks going, and if he can't end up on mount, he's kind of lost out in there. And the win on the Contender Series, the guy did have a couple moments. He's 0-3 in LFA. And the win before the the Contender Series was against a 47-year-old man. So Jared doesn't show me anything I like. I really wish I could have got over the -145. That stings seeing it where it's at now. But I do think we're going to parlay Spivak with somebody later on in the night, man. I think he's a great prospect at 25 years old, and I think he gets Jared out of there within time.
One other thing to note is I've seen a lot of people kind of shit on Spivak for coming in as one of the lighter heavyweights in the division. I think he, flirts with that 235, 240 range. Well, we see Stipe Miocic, who's able to implement his wrestling heavy attack, even at the lighter weight. And then Spivak, he's proven 2 times against guys who come in at the heavyweight limit, and Carlos Felipe and Tai Tuivasa, that he can still get the fight to where he wants it, even at the size disadvantage. So that's not something that I see playing into this fight at all.
I'm with you. And one thing, I almost left it out. I can't believe I did it. You check this guy's Instagram, man, and from multiple pictures through September to now, whether it's in Russia, this guy's training with Alexander Volkov, and when he's here in in Vegas, he's training with Francis. This guy, I feel like at 25 is a sponge to some of these guys. He's training with high level heavyweights. Man, I think Sergey Spivak is one of the lock of the nights for me come Saturday.
And as we continue to talk about it, I agree completely. It just seems like I don't see very many ways that Vandera could win, and I don't see Spivak getting stopped and implementing his game plan.
I'm with you, man. Next in our featherweight division, man, we've got Billy Quarantillo, who's 15-2, taking on Gavin Tucker, who's 12-1. Man, I'm a huge fan of Billy Q. I cashed on him straight against Spike Carlisle. I cashed on the fight night going the distance against a Kyle Nelson, and I've already locked in a bet earlier in the week at -120 on this guy. He's one of my locks of the night. He's now at a -155, and we're seeing that, not be in our favor. So I think that's one that if you want to play and tell us, it's one that you should probably go ahead and get the ball rolling on. Billy Q, man, he's got a nice size advantage in this fight, 4 inches, I do believe, in height and reach. And, we've seen Gavin Tucker struggle with that height and reach advantage, particularly in the Rick Glenn fight there. And speaking of the last 2 fights, that Billy Q's had there with Kyle Nelson and Spike, I think those are 2 guys who are much bigger, much stronger. They could be lightweights, and here we have Tucker, who is a very, very small featherweight. Mm-hmm. We've seen Billy Q deal with these much bigger guys. He has phenomenal cardio. He's a very durable guy. He's extremely good on the mat, which we've seen Tucker have some success with, and I think Billy Q is going to, without a doubt, be able to hold his own there. Tucker, he's coming off his win over Justin James, where I did bet Justin James. For some reason, Gavin Tucker is just a guy that I like to fade. Doesn't have the body style for 145, man, and I see guys giving him a lot of trouble. He is coming off 2 wins, and they were both after big layoffs, so I don't want to knock him too much because I think we're going to see a good form here, man, and Gavin Tucker is back in the gym, and he's fighting a bit more consistent. So like I said, man, I expect him to be in good form. He's got very good striking, a sneaky little head kick, and a good ground game. It's just stylistically, man, he has trouble with those bigger fighters, and that's what Billy Q is here.
Yeah, so if you were to look at both these guys' records, you would think that they have relatively the same amount of experience. Mm-hmm. But if you include Billy Quarantillo's amateur record and his Ultimate Fighter record, he's a 30-fight veteran of MMA, and that's something that I really think is going to play a factor in this fight. Considering both of their records, they're both somewhat slow starters, and we see that because they get their finishes in the later rounds, especially round 3. Billy Q, you talked about Spike Carlisle being a just physical presence in there, and I think that speaks to Billy Q's experience by being able to weather that storm initially and kind of stay calm under that pressure that he was receiving, and then just kind of feel it out and start finding the holes in Spike Carlisle's game and exploiting those. On that, Billy Quarantillo, he even has a regional win over Kama Worthy, who is now in the UFC and making waves, and I really do think that it's notable. He's seen the better competition, even though he's only had 3 fights in the UFC. I think that he's seen the better competition and has performed better, in my opinion. Where you move on to Gavin Tucker at 5'6" with a 66-inch reach. That's small for any weight class.
That's Dana weight written all over it.
Yeah. And like you said, in that Rick Glenn fight, we see someone who, mimics Billy Quarantillo's body and just being a tall, lengthy fighter. And Gavin Tucker got touched up. Like you said, he got put into a 2-year layoff after that fight, and for good reason. And then we see him, like you said, take almost years between each fight. And that would be something that I'd really like to see in somebody who was 23, 24, 25, but now we get up into the mid-30s at 34 years old with Gavin Tucker, and I really do question whether or not that's the best thing that he could do right now. Mm-hmm. He does have a well-rounded game, finishing 10 of his 12 wins, but I don't see him getting it done against Billy Q. You talked about this being a lock of your night. It's also one of mine, and I think that we're going to be looking to play Billy Q straight up as we move forward.
Yeah, no disagreements from me, man. I think this is Billy Q's fight to lose. And Gavin Tucker, stylistically and historically, has troubles with guys, so that presents the kind of problems Billy Q is going to.
100%. Moving on, we go to the flyweight division with Mackenzie Dern, who's 9-1, versus Virna Jandiroba, who's 16-1. I've seen a lot of breakdowns of this fight, and a lot of people say that the ground game of both these girls will almost cancel out each other, and that it'll be a striking match, which Virna has the advantage. That's ridiculous.
We disagree.
That is absolutely ridiculous. We are talking about the former number 1 ranked IBJJF competitor in both the absolute and her weight class. Mm-hmm. She's the ADCC and no-gi black belt world champion, and her belt comes from Wellington Diaz, who got his under the Gracie family. Mm-hmm. She is She is the women's best Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu specialist in the world.
She's the women's Brian Ortega, man. Her jiu-jitsu comes from the motherland.
Yes, and you know, Mackenzie Dern, she shows a lot of holes in her game. Mm-hmm. She is kind of she is green, especially in MMA, but she's only been training MMA for less than 4 years. Right. So we're going to see these leaps of improvements every single time. And I wish that the line would reflect what I'm seeing people talk about. Right. They're saying Virna, but we've seen the line only go in Mackenzie Dern's favor, and that's because I think that some people are using their head.
Right.
If Virna is willing to go to the ground with Mackenzie Dern, it's game over. It's not that the black belts are not all the same, you know? And just because Virna is a black belt does not mean that she's not going to get subbed immediately when she gets on the ground with the best women's Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu specialist in the world, especially before she transitioned to MMA. Mackenzie Dern has had some luck in her past 2 fights.
Yeah.
In the Hannah Cyphers fight, one, she's facing Hannah Cyphers. That's lucky enough, and she was able to get the knee bar. But in her last fight against Randa Marcos, she slipped on a kick, and Randa Marcos just went into her guard. Like there's like she didn't have any clue what the accolades of Mackenzie Dern's ground game is. Both of those easy finishes, and you know, I think that'll be the story of any girl at 115 that wants to get on the ground with her. Virna, she's 16-1 with her only loss coming to Carla Esparza. Carla Esparza's wrestling and top pressure seemed to be the deciding factor of that fight. She was able to control Virna for the majority of the fight, and was able to coast out a decision in the most Carla Esparza way possible. Virna, in her last time out, she faced Felice Herrig, and it was another one. That's not an impressive win, in my opinion.
That's the one we talked about, a 35-year-old coming off an ACL tear, when we speak of athletes having trouble. This is a woman, 35-year-old, not a top athlete.
100%. Virna's got a telegraphed overhand right. I don't think that her striking is, leaps and bounds better than Mackenzie Dern. It's better. One thing I will note is Virna's wrestling entries are like tenfold better than Dern's. Dern, I would say that other than her striking, Mackenzie Dern's biggest problem is getting it to the ground. She's been very lucky up until this point to fall and people go into her guard. But Virna, unless she comes out and becomes a completely different striker, if she's willing to go to the ground with her wrestling, which is her only path to victory in her 17 fights, she is going to get she is going to get just schooled on the ground, and I really do believe that.
Man, I'm glad we see this fight the same way. And like you said, man, everything that I'm seeing on MMA Twitter and stuff is people on Jandiroba, man, but the line's just not reflecting it the way that we want to see it. I mean, obviously I follow her on Instagram. Mackenzie Dern looks to be in excellent shape right now, man.
Yes, she does.
I know her last fight and this one, she spent a lot of time with Jason Perillo. She's really working on those hands, and there's not really a pure boxing coach out there that Jason Perillo is legit as it gets, man. He's been people's longtime trainer, Michael Bisping, for a long time. And it is world-class jiu-jitsu. Anybody that thinks Virna Jandiroba is going to come out here and have success on the mat against Mackenzie Dern, I think is sadly mistaken. I don't think these girls' jiu-jitsu is going to negate each other and it be a standing fight. These is two girls that their entire career, they've got the fight to the mat. You don't come out here mid-career and just change your fighter. It doesn't happen. Virna Jandiroba, man, 17 fights. This girl's got 13 wins by submission. She's got one path to victory. Jandiroba does not come out here and beat girls up on the feet. What makes you think she's going to do that this fight?
Right.
Not only that, I think people are pumping this girl's head up, man. I think she's going to pull the Randa Marcos. I think she's going to be willing to go to the mat with Mackenzie Dern, and I think that round that she does it, she will gladly pay for it. You didn't mention it here, but a spot that I'm super interested in is the under 2.5 here. The under 2.5 is sitting at plus money. The last 6 wins these girls have, all under 2.5 rounds. This fight's going to hit the mat. If people think Virna's that good, cool. Her wrestling's better. Her ground and pound's better, cool. She can get Dern out of there. It's not going to happen. This fight's going to hit the mat, and Dern's going to pull off a sub in under 2.5 rounds. really wish we could get Mackenzie Dern at much better odds because I don't like laying the chalk at almost 2-1 or 2-1 odds. But man, I love Dern here, and I'm going against what I've seen a lot of people think.
100%. One other thing I'd like to touch on is the Amanda Ribas fight. Mm-hmm. That's one fight that I can guarantee people are going to bring up when criticizing Mackenzie Dern. Right. That was her first fight back from her pregnancy and having her first child. And, again, she was, she's 27 now. She was... she was a year younger and still just green, you know?
Ribas is like the hottest prospect in that division right now. People read way too much into that loss, man.
Right. And like, I would be much more concerned with Mackenzie Dern fighting somebody like Angela Hill or Michelle Watterson or somebody who I know's path to victory is going to be keeping it on the feet, like stopping the takedown, that kind of stuff. If it's a person that goes on the ground with you, Mackenzie Dern is going to deuce on you. I don't have any other way to put it, but Mackenzie Dern is women's BJJ. Yeah. And I think that people are just overlooking that for whatever reason. If that line moves at all, we're going to be hopping on it, maybe a straight bet, but at this point it is getting into that parlay odds, range. Sure. So
absolutely, but we can definitely agree, man. There's levels to jiu-jitsu, and I hope Mackenzie Dern gets to show that on Saturday. And in our prelim main event, we have Cub Swanson, who's 26-11, taking on Daniel Pineda, who's 27-13, and a ton of fights between these guys, man, a ton of experience. You got Cub coming off the win over Cron Gracie there in Tampa that we saw, and looked good, man. Was able to stuff the takedowns and was able to piece him up on the feet. He's constantly training with TJ Dillashaw and their strength coach out of that garage that just makes them do outrageous stuff, man. It is on a next level fitness some of these guys.
And it shows in their physique.
It does, man. Cub is always in good shape. You never see Cub on his Instagram out of shape, man. That's one of the guys I've followed for a long time. And if he's not in the gym training, he is in the gym working out. I'll tell you that. He's nice at picking his shots, man. Cub does not mind. As he's gotten older at 37, Cub does not mind beating you over 15 minutes and taking it to the judges' scorecards anymore. And, Pineda, like all 13 losses, I'm pretty sure, are by decision losses, man. So it's that's definitely Cub's path to victory here. He doesn't need to get drawn into those brawls anymore, into those firefights. I think he needs to stick to the outside, use his striking, his footwork, his nice little head kick he has, to just beat Pineda over 15 minutes. Pineda is in his second UFC stint after not having the most success his first time around. He's bounced around the organizations and making his way to PFL where he had a bunch of success and, then had both of his wins overturned after some PED use. He did get his UFC call there and he took out, the surgeon Herbert Burns as a plus 250 dog. Now, a lot of people say that was a really super bad weight cut for Herbert Burns. I think he did miss by a couple pounds and stuff, and I don't know how much I can read into it, but no doubt is Pineda did look good. Pineda has finished... I think almost all of his fights, man. He's got a ton of submissions, and Pineda is a dog in that round one, man. He goes for broke, trying to get you down to the mat. I really could see Pineda maybe winning the first round in Cub. Winning the next two after he gets some of those takedowns figured out, or maybe after Pineda kind of loses some of that energy trying to get Cub out of there in the first round. We've seen Cub get subbed by a lot of guys in his career, but man, just. None of those guys, or Daniel Pineda is none of those guys. You're talking about Moicano and Ortega and Edgar and Holloway. You're talking about the elite of the division, and Daniel Pineda is just not that, in my opinion. The resume of Cub Swanson stands out. It's miles ahead of Daniel Pineda, and I think we've seen over and over again, man, that we've seen him lose to some of that top competition, but we've seen Cub Swanson come out of there with great wins over people like Dustin Poirier and plenty of other names on that list. I think the veteran's going to get it done, man. Pineda's he's had more fights than Cub, man. He's coming off steroid use. He's been in more, I think you could say, quote unquote, wars than Cub has been. And you see Daniel Pineda getting some scrappy fights. And I personally just have like a real small bet on Cub Swanson as a dog. He did open at a pick'em, so I think that's where this fight should stay, as close to a pick'em. I like Cub Swanson, plus 135 dog. It's definitely just one of those dogs on the card that I think has a good chance of winning.
So if you were to look at this fight blindly, and you have two guys with very similar records, and one guy has 18 wins by submission, and the other one has 7 losses by submission, almost every single time you're going to go with the guy with the submission victories. That's not what I'm seeing here. You know, Pineda does have 18 submission victories, but who is that over?
Right.
You know, and then Cub Swanson with his 7 submission losses, like you touched on, they're the upper echelon of the division of the UFC, let alone. Cub Swanson in his last fight out against Kron Gracie, you could tell he was working with TJ Dillashaw with the way that he circles out of people pressuring him up against the cage, his footwork, everything. You know, it really does resemble the game of TJ Dillashaw. And that even in that Burgos fight, which is the second to last one, you know, it was a split decision against somebody who I would consider a future of that division. Right. Shane Burgos is one of the most well-rounded, biggest featherweights that I know right now. And to go to a split decision with him at 36 years old at the time, that's something worth noting for sure. Yeah, I think Cub, he's getting bad looks right now because he's 1-4 in his last 5, but they're two, you know, legit guys. One of the things that kind of worries me is that Cub Swanson has, let's say, like a questionable fight IQ. You know, I think the biggest fight that kind of makes me question his fight IQ is the Brian Ortega. You know, he gets caught in the submission in round 1, and you're like, okay, that was close. You got saved by the bell. Yeah. Comes out in round 2 and does the exact same thing.
Leaves his neck out there for the taking.
Right, and you know, that was a guillotine that he got caught in multiple times. Daniel Pineda, here recently, in his past 5 fights, he's got 2 guillotine wins. That's something that does worry me. If Pineda gets the win, I'm going to call it by sub. If Cub Swanson gets the win, like you said, I think the decision is there. That's something that maybe I would look into. If I could get Cub Swanson at, you know, 2-1 dog odds for the decision win, that might be the way that I play this fight. I do see Cub Swanson getting this done. I don't think it's going to be an easy win. And somebody at 145 at 37 years old, I would definitely be suspect to play them. But he's not fighting a spring chicken in Daniel Pineda. Right. It's a 35-year-old who has the same amount of fights and, you know, like you said, has been in, you know, equivalent or worse fights as far as taking damage. You touched on it. He has out of his 27 wins, he has 100% finish rate. Like, that's unheard of. Yeah. That's Deontay Wilder numbers in MMA, and you just don't see that. So, especially at 145, right. I lean towards Cub Swanson because he's the proven out of the two. Pineda, you know, he has had that UFC run and it didn't work out for him. He gets Herbert Burns, and I think we touched on it. Might have been Herbert Burns that was coming in heavier than what he was allowed to. And then, you know, Pineda, he's already resorted to performance-enhancing drugs in those 2 the 2 no contests now in his last 3 fights. I didn't think that his body looked great in the Herbert Burns fight either. Right. You know, there was a little bit of loose skin, and if you're at 155 or below and have any loose skin on you, I question your
cardio.
Yeah, your cardio, your build, if that's really your weight class, all that kind of stuff. So I'm definitely going with Cub Swanson here to get it done. I think that the odds are like they are because of Swanson's last 5 fights, realistically. But I do think that he's the vet. They're both vets, but I think Cub Swanson's been the more battle-tested vet, and I can see him getting this done and using his fight IQ, even though I just questioned it, to get the decision win. Yeah,
man, I'm right there with you. I'm glad we agreed that we think the veteran Cub Swanson's going to get it done on Saturday.
Kicking off the pay-per-view, we have Junior Dos Santos, who's 21-8, versus Ciryl Gane, who is 6-0. This is a big heavyweight matchup right here, and one that I'm really looking forward to. You know, Junior Dos Santos, he's gotten to the point in his career where if he's not perfect over the course of 15 or 25 minutes, he's going to get KO'd. Yeah. And I hate saying that, and being in heavyweight, that's not the position that you want to be in. You know, he's been in the UFC since 2008, and it shows. You know, he's not a 36-year-old like it says he is. He's a 36-year-old with 20 UFC fights.
Miles on the body.
Right. Been in just some of the most notable wars in MMA history with Cain Velasquez. So it just, I'm not too high on Dos Santos anymore. I know in his last bout he faced Rosenstruck and he looked good initially. Like, he was able to utilize his movement and touch Rosenstruck a little bit, but it really did just come down to the fact that Rosenstruck was able to land a couple of good shots, and Dos Santos' chin is just deteriorated to the point where if you do land a clean shot, you're gonna put him to sleep. And we've seen that in his last 3 bouts. Even the wrestler Curtis Blades was able to, whenever his wrestling game wasn't working for him, resort to striking, his second approach of trying to win a bout, and he was still able to KO JDS. Francis Ngannou KOs everybody. And then Alistair Overeem, another technical striker, where he just had problems with him. He just can't deal with a long technical striker. Now we move over to Ciryl Gane, who's a 6'4", 81-inch reach heavyweight, who's got a perfect 12-0 Muay Thai record and a 2-time national champion. He's gonna knock out JDS, and I hate to just say it like that, but he is. He's a far superior striker, and at 6-0, you'd think he was 60-0. I mean, he is composed. He's got measured technical striking. He has the ability to switch stances. He's training at MMA Factory. Like, he's got the best training partners. He's got everything going for him right now, other than the fact that he's had 4 canceled bouts this year, and this has been his longest layoff since beginning his MMA career. He has the momentum in his corner. Thankfully, I don't think that he's like cutting weight, so I don't think that those 4 canceled bouts are like really taking effect on him physically. In his 3 UFC fights, he's fought Rafael Pessoa, who he just just outclassed. You could tell from the moment they were out there that he was reading every single one of Pessoa's strikes. Then Dontel Mays, any other heavyweight gets knocked out. Right. Dontel Mays took some of the hardest shots I've ever seen. And then Tanner Boser, who has a freak of nature chin.
Tough as they come.
Yeah. Ciryl, the sky's the limit. I think we've both talked about how one day he will touch gold. Yes. Being at 30 years old, I'm going to need him to start fighting just a little bit more, but I do think that he has all the right tools to be a future champ, and JDS is way over the hill.
Yeah. We see this fight the exact same way, man. This is, he had texted me the other day and said, just JDS and RDA have the same manager, because, man, they just keep giving this guy to the wolves, man. He's become that person in the division that, you got to get through in order to get to the belt. But his durability has taken a landslide, man. It's not almost non-existent anymore, and it's due to the shots he's taken and the wars that he's been in his 12-year career in the UFC, man. And durability is one thing it can't go when you're at heavyweight. It's the one thing you need to stay and keep at heavyweight, man. And I think that's shown as he is on an L3 being KO'd in all of them, man. And standing across from him, like you said, man, is a guy that we think is going to touch gold one day, and a fucking physical specimen of a human being, man. This guy looks like Alistair Overeem did on steroids, but not Ciryl Gane. At 6 pro fights is seriously about to find himself with a top 10 number next to his name come Saturday, and I think it's rightfully deserving. You talked about his Muay Thai background. It is so evident in this guy's striking, man. His knees in the clinch, his elbows, and just the speed on all his shots. It's unreal, man. And I don't want to be mean, but JDS may be one of those perfect guys to put it on display for, and get the public to know Ciryl Gane's name come Saturday. I don't want to just spend too much time on it, man, because I think Ciryl Gane is going to win this fight hands down. I think if it goes to the mat, if it's on the feet, I think this guy's only weakness is straight up his inexperience. In the year layoff, we've seen 3 of his last 4 opponents have issues making it to the octagon. Nobody wants to fight this guy, in my opinion. What we talked about, man, is I know we had talked about Ciryl Gane inside the distance at like a minus 150. Hammer the shit out of it. And then if you're in Tennessee like us, man, and sports betting's legal for you on FanDuel right now, the fight ending in TKO or KO, either fighter is a minus 135. And that's the lock of the night, man.
That's where the money's at right there.
If JDS gets it done, it's 100% by catching Ciryl Gane coming in with one of those overhands. Or he's got good boxing. He's got good takedown defense. I don't just want to shit on Junior, but he talked about it. He's 36. He's older than 36. Physically, when you look at him, he's over the hill. And it's time for the new wave to come in here and take over, man.
100%.
The next fight on the main card takes place in our middleweight division, man. That's between Kevin Holland, who's 20-5, and Jacare Souza, who's 26-8. And guys who are, kind of on the opposite end of their careers right now. You've got Souza, who's 41 years old, and although, from the time he's been in the UFC to right now, he's fought the absolute studs of the division, and in my favorite division, man. Some of the toughest competition you're going to see, and now 41 years old, on a little bit of a layoff, definitely approaching the end of his career, man. And on the other end of the spectrum, there's Kevin Holland, who has, probably been the most active guy, I think, on the roster that the UFC has had. This will be his 5th fight of 2020, so he's going for his 5th win of 2020 as well. Not many guys can say they have 5 wins in a year, man. That's got to be some type of record of getting close up to it. So with this one, man, we had Kevin Holland, Marvin Vettori switch opponents there for us, and in my opinion, I think it was beneficial for the both of them. I think Marvin Vettori kind of got a guy that was a better suit for him to beat, and I think Kevin Holland maybe have gotten a guy that was a little bit easier for him to beat as well. That being said, it was because Kevin Holland got COVID, and I know we talked about it the other day, wanting to keep track of that and seeing how fighters perform after they're the ones that test positive. And I've had it myself, man, and to tell you, I could see it taking a toll on the cardio and stuff like that. Now, there's been people that say they have no symptoms at all and it doesn't affect them, so I definitely want to lean toward that end of the spectrum since he's fighting so relatively soon. He's supposed to be fighting last week, So, I got to think that it probably hasn't affected him very much. Kevin Holland is going to have a massive, massive reach advantage like he does in a ton of his fights, and just a massive speed and youth and athleticism advantage here. He's got very good submissions. I talk about it every time as brown belt under Travis Luther. It's a fucking legit brown belt. It's one of them as legit as it gets. And this guy pops that right hand out there quick. It is he catches you coming in, and it has some speed on it, dude. His fight IQ is where you knock him though, man, because he's willing to just put himself into the fire, into the danger. And he's also willing to accept the grappling exchanges way too much, and was very worried when I saw Darren Stewart, get the best of him in some of those grappling exchanges, because Jacare's not one of those guys that, you want to give that, some of those positions up to. Jacare, at 41 years old, at minus 110, how it's now become a pick'em, I can't find a reason to bet him. But at the plus 150 that he was at one point, I see value on it all day, man. He is taking a step down in competition from what he is used to. It is a newcomer on a hot streak, but it's still a step down from the elite competition. He's coming off a loss to the light heavyweight champ. I think he needs to shoot early and often here, man. I think once he gets his hands on Holland, he might realize that he has a bit of a strength advantage there, and I like I battle back and forth with the over and under, but the more I think about it, I think I like the over 2.5 in this one, because I think Kevin Holland can avoid the submission. I think he accepts the ground game and on bottom too much, but I think he might be able to avoid the submissions of Souza. And the only two guys that we've seen finish Souza are Bobby Knuckles and Musashi back in Strikeforce. So I don't know if Kevin Holland is going to be the one to go out there and finish him. I'm torn, but I do lean toward Kevin Holland. And this is that fight for us this week.
Yeah, so started off, I will hand Preston. By the end of last week, between the Justin James and Gabriel Benitez fight, I had talked enough shit to work this up to $20 on the podcast. So
I'll gladly take that.
There you go.
I know that stings.
This is where I win it back, though. Jacare Souza, I think physically we're going to see him be able to impose his game plan on Kevin Holland. Kevin Holland, this fight is at 185, but Kevin Holland's a true 170er. He is absolutely huge for 170, but if he can cut to 170,
he's made it multiple times.
He should be a 170er in my opinion. You talked about the activeness of Kevin Holland. This is his 17th MMA fight in 3 years. That's wild to say.
Yeah.
So, some of the strengths of Kevin Holland, he's good at fighting backwards. Whenever fighters are coming in, he has great vision while he's striking and is able to use those long limbs to really connect with his opponents.
Snipe you coming in.
And then immediately circle out. Mm-hmm. Now, that being said, I think that Kevin Holland would much prefer a full-sized octagon than the Apex octagon that's 5 feet smaller all the way around.
Right.
I really do think that Kevin Holland, if he gets pushed up against the cage like Souza wants, we've seen Souza in the past wear on his opponents by kind of grinding him on the cage. I think we're going to see Souza be able to pick him up and just dominate him on the ground. He's so strong in the grappling exchanges, and coming down from 205, like he's going to be able to impose his strength on Kevin Holland. I mean, he was almost getting Blachowicz down. I say that, almost only counts, and
nobody gets Blachowicz down.
Right.
Man.
So him looking even good enough to get a split decision from the current champion, I think that he's just too much for Kevin Holland. Souza is 41 years old, but I feel like for the last 5 years I've been talking about how old Souza is, and he's still putting up good fights. One knock on Souza is if this does go, like you said, the over 2.5, and it does go to the judges, something that Souza does bad is volume striking. Mm-hmm. It seems like it takes him some time to kind of wake up mid-fight and start to throw those combos that he has, but just would rather walk towards his opponent than try and cut off the octagon and force his opponents to engage with him. Kevin Holland, he accepts being on the bottom a few times, and to guys that are much lesser grapplers than Ronaldo Souza. One of them that sticks out is the Brendan Allen fight, where you've got a green 185er who gets you on the ground, and you just lay there for a little bit. And then at the same time, the Darren Stewart fight, I think he did it at the end of round 1 and at the end of round 3. There were multiple times where Kevin Holland might as well have been Derek Lewis on his back, I mean, just laying there and accepting the position, but continuing to talk shit. And I don't think that that's a position where you should be, taking time off.
Especially with someone on the level of the grappling that Souza has. Man.
Yeah, you got to hope that Kevin Holland is looking to get up to his feet immediately, like not even give it the chance. Create a scramble, give up your back, do whatever you have to do to get it to the feet immediately, because Souza's not going to get any worse as the fight goes on. We saw him in the Jacare Manson fight go 5 rounds and look good, and even perform some of his best rounds in the 3rd through 5th. So I lean towards Jacare Souza. They're really counting him out with the odds. I mean, Kevin Holland starting at the minus 175. I think that it's been bet down to where it should have been, and I do think that this is closer to a pick'em fight, which is why we chose this one for our money fight. But I definitely lean towards Souza, and I think that although he doesn't technically have the size advantage, the strength advantage of Souza will really play a factor in this fight.
Yeah, man. So I can't disagree with you, because this is a super, super close fight. And like you said, the way it's been bet down, I think absolutely reflects that. And I hope to not have to hand you this back come next week.
Moving on, we go to the 155-pound division with Renato Moicano, who's 14-3-1, versus Rafael Fiziev, who is only 8-1. You would think at 8-1 that Fiziev would have plenty of holes in his game to exploit, but in the fights that we've seen him in the UFC, he looks very composed. He looks really good. In his debut against Magomed Mustafayev, he got caught with a spinning back kick, and it kind of slowed the expectations of a lot of people down. It was kind of disappointing, but then he showed in his next 2 fights after that against Alex White and Mark DeCasey that he's right where he needs to be in the UFC. He is one of the striking coaches at Tiger Muay Thai, and rightfully so. This guy has some of the hardest kicks, some of the hardest punches for 155 that I've ever seen. He has the ability to switch stances, and he obviously has the Muay Thai clinch. He sits on his punches and throws with so much power, specifically in the Alex White fight. Some of the body shots he was ripping was very impressive. It was just scary to watch. And in the DeCasey fight, you go to the left body kick. He I mean, it sounded like a judge hitting his gavel. It was just a cracking sound that was just, it makes you like kind of gasp whenever you hear it, because you just don't see that type of power at 155. On the Moicano side, he is a complete fighter, and if it's not looking to wrap up a submission, he looks to counter while he's striking. I don't think that he's going to be able to implement that game plan against the striking coach in Fiziev.
Right.
Moicano, in one of his fights that stands out, it's to the Korean Zombie, who the fight only lasted like a minute long, but Moicano tried to almost like gauge distance with an early jab, or with a lead jab. And it was lazily thrown out there, and he didn't pop it right back in. And the Korean Zombie was able to come over top with a right hand that just annihilated Moicano. And, we've seen, you would think that the height advantage would be something that Moicano can really lean on, but we've seen in his last 2 fights with people under 5'8", he's gotten caught and knocked out. So, that's something to definitely look out at. And even in the Cub Swanson fight, he ended up getting the better of Cub Swanson, but Cub had some early success striking, and that might be just something where it's a feeling out process for Moicano until he can kind of get the timing. I just, once again, I don't think he's going to be able to get it against the, experienced striker in Fiziev. So I definitely lean towards Fiziev here. I think that we're probably going to make a play on him.
So, man, right there with you, brother. That is definitely going to be somebody that we look to play straight come Saturday. Moicano, man, at featherweight, he was a nice little prospect coming up there for a little bit. He gave Brian Ortega a damn good fight. But every time he took that step up, man, with Ortega and Aldo and Zombie, he got finished in all 3 of them. And, then he's made the move up to lightweight. At 31 years old, that's too young to be switching weight classes.
They're too old.
Yeah, it's just, he's not finding his success and stuff. I don't think lightweight is this division. He's getting KO'd by smaller guys, so you come up to, guys with even more power. He is coming off a confidence-boosting little win over Damir Hazovic, and I think he's gonna try the same approach to this fight. I think he's gonna come in there and try to put Fiziev up against the fence, to negate some of those striking skills that Fiziev has, because Fiziev, man, is an absolute legit prospect that everybody's got their eyes on. This guy is riding that 2-fight winning streak against guys who are 5'11", the same size as Moicano. So not only have we had Moicano have success with, or trouble with shorter guys with power, we've seen Fiziev, have success with those taller guys with the long body where that's open for that body kick. Speaking of the body kick, man, his calf kick is absolutely unreal as well. And I think this guy has the power to put Moicano away. I really do, whether it's a body shot, whether it's one of the overhand rights on one of those lazy jabs Moicano's going to throw. I like Fiziev in this spot. I really wish we would have jumped on him a little bit sooner. I know we got him at like a -150 earlier today when we played him, but opening as a -115, I'm pretty sure we were looking to bet him a couple weeks ago when they were supposed to fight. This is a guy that you and I are confident on. He's got a little interesting way of defending that head kick, the little matrix defense, and we've seen that even into his Muay Thai days. So, not the biggest fan of it, but I mean it works for him. That being said, man, just Moicano, his resume is legit. He's been in there with the much, much better fighters than Fiziev has. The closest thing to a losing opponent that Moicano has there is in his pro debut when he took on a guy who was 4-2. So that is the opponent with the least amount of fights and the closest thing to a losing record. Moicano has a good mix-up game where he mixes in his takedowns. He's got good Muay Thai himself, but I don't see him coming out here and out-striking a guy who makes a living off striking, So I definitely think Fiziev will get this one done on Saturday night.
I completely agree.
And moving on to the co-main event of the evening, maybe general consensus, the fight everybody's most looking forward to on the card here, man. We have a lightweight showdown between Tony Ferguson, who's 25-4, and Charles Oliveira, who's 29-8. And this is definitely the fight that I'm looking forward to the most. Man, Tony's becoming that company, man. When you need a good fight to put a cherry on top of a card or something, or save the card, call Tony Ferguson, man. He's wanting to fight. He is returning off of his lost to Gaethje where his 12-fight win streak was derailed, and man, I don't think anybody saw that coming, man. Ferguson was dismantled for 25 straight minutes. But, man, what you saw is a tough son of a bitch, man. If Gaethje can't put you out of there after what Gaethje had been doing to his previous opponents, man, Charles Oliveira's going to have a tough time getting Tony Ferguson out of there. Tony Ferguson has a super good jab, man. A stabbing front kick from hell that he throws wildly. And a good right hand. It's almost like a pull counter, man, that he'll fake it, get you to move, and then come right back with it and knock people out, a couple times with it. But the best thing this guy has going for him is his cardio. This guy is a cardio machine. People say he overtrains and overworks himself, but this guy, I think you see it, the constant training and cardio work every time he gets into the octagon, because guys might have success early in that round 1, but dude, come close to the end of round 2 and 3, it's almost like Khabib, man. They look like they are drowning out there. They have their moments of success, don't get me wrong, but they look like they're drowning out there come that 10-minute mark with Tony Ferguson. Man, you want to talk about a guy who's hit his stride and stuff? It is Charles Oliveira. This guy's on a 7-fight win streak. He's finished all 7 of his opponents within an 18-month span. He's one of the most active fighters we have seen on the roster as of late. He's got a wicked ground game. You see Tony have such success locking up chokes and stuff on the ground, and it's a guy I don't really think he's going to have success with. It's a guy that I think he'll have success keeping this on the feet. I talked about his front kick that he throws like a wild man. It's naked. He doesn't hide it with the strikes, and his chin is out there for the taking for sure. And we've seen some people capitalize and be able to hit him with his bad striking defense. But Charles Oliveira, yes, he's got good striking out of shoot box. His right hand has become very nice, man. You saw him put out Jared Gordon with it. He's got a nice little sneaky uppercut that he hit Kevin Lee with it a couple times. But Kevin Lee is the best win on that boy's resume. Yes, he's finished 7 in a row, but man, you can argue 5 of those 7 are not going to be on the roster at the end of the year when Dana comes doing all these cuts, man. Nick Lentz, David Tamer, Jim Miller, and Jared Gordon, man. I mean, none of these guys are Tony Ferguson. And Lee, I got a soft spot for him, and you know that, man. I think this guy, if he ever just will get his shit together, the sky is the limit. But he quits on himself, and we absolutely saw him do that in the Charles Oliveira fight. And I mentioned that, I have the soft spot for him, so I can't let it go to say that was our first event with no crowd. And he was all the way down in Brazil fighting Charles Oliveira. So, I know I can't shit on him that too much because he's my guy. But I think Tony Ferguson, man, keeps his fight standing. And ultimately, he just kind of drowns Charles Oliveira. I think he throws too much volume and won't let Charles Oliveira get comfortable in there. So,
you talked about Ferguson kind of overwhelming his opponents, kind of pushing that pace and trying to implement that cardio heavy attack, where he tries to drag him into those deep waters. It's weirdly enough, I think Oliveira is like the only guy in the division that kind of mirrors his attack. Oliveira is a fast starter, and we've seen that in his finishes. They're all by first or second round, except for the Kevin Lee fight where, one thing that Charles Oliveira did good in the Kevin Lee fight, other than getting the guillotine choke, is he created scrambles a whole lot. That's something that Tony Ferguson also looks to do. So if it does go to the ground, I see both of these guys finding a way to get it back to the feet. That being said, Oliveira, he lost a couple of positional scrambles in the Kevin Lee fight that had Kevin Lee wind up on top. Kevin Lee also completely mounted Tony Ferguson in their fight. So without the staph infection, who knows how that fight would have gone. So I can't knock either guy for their performances against Kevin Lee. But it is, it does kind of show that their styles are very similar. Are very similar. And I think that even at 5'10 and 5'11, they have the same frame for the division. Tony, he's the much more proven guy, like you said, but at 36 years old and having the style that he uses, how much longer can he do it? He was able to withstand 5 rounds of an ass beating from Justin Gaethje, but is he going to continue to be able to do that in his age? I think that his time is coming, and believe me, Preston's heard enough how many times I'd like to fade Tony Ferguson, and there was about 3 people in the top 10 of 155 that I wouldn't bet against, or that I would bet that I wouldn't bet for. And Charles Oliveira is one of those 3 people, and that was really disappointing because I was looking so badly to fade Tony Ferguson because it was a long time coming. It really was. And I think that I kind of have that mindset because I watched the Anthony Pettis fight where he gets dropped and has to scramble and then is able to overwhelm him, but it's still like you can't get dropped by Anthony Pettis. You can't get
Vandera.
Right, by Lando Veneta. You can't get mounted by Kevin Lee. You can't get just your ass whooped by Gaethje and then expect me to have confidence in your fights. That being said, it is Charles Oliveira, and I do think that Tony Ferguson is one of the locks of the night. I feel like I'm contradicting myself as I talk, and I am, but it's a very interesting
Oliveira was
fight.
that name on the list that you said. He is one of the only 3 people that Tony can fight, and I won't fade Tony Ferguson. So you're very much backing up that statement.
Okay, so here we are. I'm picking Tony Ferguson straight. We might play him on the podcast. That'll be officially my pick.
That sounds good, man. I'm with Tony Ferguson as well. You had mentioned the scrambling ability and stuff that Charles Oliveira was able to cause and really kind of tire out Kevin Lee there. And you mentioned that guillotine, man. That's a theme in this co-main event and the main event. Both of the champ, Figueiredo and Oliveira, I mean, they're the best 2 at locking up a guillotine on a takedown entry. That being said, you don't see Tony shoot double legs and stuff very much.
You'll see an ankle pick.
You'll see an ankle pick. You'll see an Imanari roll, something like that coming your way. But I think Tony knows that the skill level of Charles Oliveira has on the ground. I think he knows he's not going to be able to come out there and lock up a Darce and finish this guy on, quickly like he has some other ones. I think he knows he needs to keep it on the feet. He's the better striker. He's going to have the better cardio, and I think he wins by decision on Saturday.
And let's say this does, stay on the feet, and they do kind of get in that telephone booth area of fighting. That's Tony Ferguson's world. Yeah. Him working on that Wing Chun dummy, he's got all the sharp elbows, the crisp, dirty boxing style. Like he's that's his realm right there.
Yeah, I mentioned the uppercut that Charles Oliveira had, but we saw Gaethje kind of get saved by the bell with the little uppercut Tony landed.
Yeah, I remember.
Another thing, these guys are very similar with each other, and I think Tony's just been in there with the better guys and doesn't drop the ball historically in those big fights like Oliveira has.
100%. Moving on to the main event, we've got 2 flyweights in Deiveson Figueiredo, who's 20-1, versus the assassin baby Brandon Moreno, who is 18-5-1. The quickest turnaround for any champion ever, and just 3 weeks out from his last bout, Figueiredo comes back after beating Alex Perez with a first-round guillotine, and I question for a guy who cuts that much weight if that's the right choice for him. It being that little bit of a time, even if he didn't take a lot of damage in his fight, his body took a lot of damage cutting that weight. And in that aspect of this, I favor Moreno. It's about where it ends as far as favoring Moreno. Figueiredo, he can switch stances. I think one of the best things that he has going for him is I truly believe that he believes he's the best in the world. Yeah. And we see that in just the glaring confidence he has whenever he does fight. God forbid he smells blood, because he will walk forward like the Terminator with that right hand and look to just end your night at 125. And it's crazy to see that in a division where I specifically have not been a fan of for the longest time, but as I get just further into the UFC and further into this division, I am starting to lighten up, and I do think
Demetrius Johnson was removed.
As long as Demetrius Johnson is out of there, I'm happy with the 125-pound division. You're right. Some knocks on Figueiredo. He trains out of his own gym. Yeah. I don't like that. Yeah. That's been one of the things that I'll always touch on. If there's a fighter who's training out of his own gym, it usually doesn't work well. As of now, he's proved me wrong, but I wonder if he's going to continue to improve on his skills like these other younger flyweights will be able to. One fight that's interesting to me is that Moreno has beaten the only guy to give Figueiredo an L on his record, and that's Jussier Formiga. Formiga was just able to implement his wrestling heavy attack a little bit more in the Figueiredo fight than the Moreno fight. Moreno, in his second UFC stint, he's undefeated now at 4-0-1. That draw coming to Askarov, and it was a weird fight.
Yeah,
don't really know what else to say other than it was just an odd fight to me. Moreno, he also fought 3 weeks ago, and he fought Brandon Royval. It was a weird fight because we didn't get to see how it would play out over the course of time because Royval had a shoulder injury. Yeah. And it was one that I was a little disappointed in how it ended, but I'm also happy that we were able to make this fight right here, where a lot of people thought that Moreno was the rightful claim to the next title challenger before the Alex Perez fight was even made. Moreno, one of the biggest knocks I have on him is he has a very awkward striking stance. He almost puts his head and chin over the center line of his body, and that's the first thing that he has out, where he kind of drops his left hand and opens his palms, especially when he's feeling himself. He kind of opens his palms and really drops that left hand, and I do think that that'll get him in trouble, especially with the overhand right power of Figueiredo. I really hope that Moreno's addressed that and will fight accordingly, but I see Figueiredo being able to land just a huge overhand right and knock Moreno out. And that, me saying that about 125ers is pretty foreign, and I really do believe it.
It is, man, but Figueiredo has made the flyweight division exciting again. This guy has finished his last 4 fights before they hit the 3rd round, and that's something you do not see typically. No. And that's not something you saw in the former champ that ran the division for so long now. I think we're at the point where we are seeing Figueiredo improve every fight. You're seeing the fight money be put into his camp, being put into his nutrition, and I think we're seeing the repercussions of that, of how good he looks. He's got a great timing on that right hand, man, and I think that is a very good shot of the way he gets this done, because Brandon Moreno, he eats shots, man. He does, and he not a guy, you typically can get away with that at flyweight. That's not a guy you can get away with that in Figueiredo there. The scales, man, it's been Figueiredo's one little problem that he's had, and the quick turnaround, it is worrisome. I know we talked about his new nutritionist the last time we broke it down and stuff, and he made the weight with 0 issues the last time, and I think I heard him say he came in at like 148, 150. He was putting on 20 pounds after fight night, and here he is cutting a ton of weight again. And then his other kryptonite being, someone who's going to implement the wrestling plan. And we saw Formiga have success with that. But then we saw better wrestlers, in my opinion, in Tim Elliott and Alex Perez get that guillotine locked up on them the first time they shot. And I think that's what I'm going to call, again, as I think we see Figueiredo back-to-back guillotine, man. I think Moreno is obviously going to come in there with that grappling heavy attack. He's going to come in there with the head out. He's shooting in. He's going to shoot in from far out because he's not going to want to be in the range of the right hand. And I see Figueiredo locking up that guillotine again. Now, Brandon Moreno's kind of always been a guy that I've had a soft spot for since, on the Ultimate Fighter. This guy was the 16th seed, having to fight the number 1 seed in Pantoja, and, didn't go his way. Then you saw the flyweight division kind of up in the air, and him kind of, he didn't, I don't know if he necessarily cut, but he was fighting outside the UFC and LFA. Now he's back in the UFC on a good win streak, and at 26, man, he's found himself in a title fight. So, the story this guy has it's inspirational, man. And you're right, he just fought 3 weeks ago, and he's a bit bigger of a flyweight. So both these guys having to cut weight again. Figueiredo, we talked about him losing to Formiga and Brandon beating Formiga, but we've also seen Figueiredo beat Pantoja, who's beaten Brandon Moreno twice. So it's like MMA math, it really doesn't add up too much. I think that Brandon Moreno at 27, he might actually hold the belt one day. I really do think it. I think this guy has a ton of room for improvement, and he's got such a solid wrestling foundation already that we will see his striking improving. But at the form that he is in right now, you'll not catch me betting against Figueiredo. But I am up in the air if I want to parlay him or not because the weight cut, it does worry me, but I think Figueiredo takes this one.
So something that I'm hearing is you've got Figueiredo by submission. I've got him by TKO.
Mm-hmm.
I really wonder what that inside the distance prop looks like.
Yeah, and absolutely. But another prop is, it hasn't happened recently, but they got it set at over 2.5 at plus 110. And these are flyweights, It's like, I get it that Figueiredo has finished a ton of these opponents, but it's still flyweights, and we got a good wrestler. So at plus money, I thought that was just, it's flyweights and it's plus money for half the fight, so it sticks off the page. I mean, but then you have, Figueiredo's not even seen that amount of time in his last 4.
Let me also throw out that our last max bet was Alex Perez Figueiredo over 2.5, and he fucked that up.
I think
bad.
that was over 1.5.
Oh God, yeah, you're right. You're right.
And he still messed that up bad, so probably something we do stay away from. But I know we talked about it. We're on the fence if we want to parlay him. The weight cut scares us, but we do think he gets the job done on Saturday.
I do.
And stuff. That does, wrap up. We only had 10 fights here, but I think there's a stacked night of fights, and I think there's some killer fights throughout this card, man. I'm going to go ahead and say, my fight to watch, it's Cub Swanson and Daniel Pineda. I think it's really sleeping on people. Pineda's got the 100% finish rate. Cub's got the vet savvy experience, and he's been in there with some absolute killers. Cub's willing to go in there and put on a show for people. You saw him fight Du Ho Choi. It's one of the most exciting fights there is. And Daniel Pineda's going to bring that kind of energy. It's a sleeper, man. I think they got it put on the prelim main event for a reason. I think Cub and Daniel Pineda is a very good fight on Saturday.
I like that pick. I think I'm going to go with, for fight of the night, Renato Moicano versus Rafael Fiziev. Mm-hmm. I think that this will answer a lot of questions that I have for Fiziev. Is he ready for that upper echelon of competition, and just how far can he make an impact at 155?
And then we'll go ahead for your fighter to watch.
My fighter to watch is Mackenzie Dern.
Good stuff.
Yes. Being as young as she is and as green as she is to MMA, she's going to answer a lot of questions with this one. Mm-hmm. And I just hope that she shuts everybody up about the jiu-jitsu being negated. This is the fighter that I'm most excited to watch.
Odds don't reflect it, but the disrespect has been there all week for Dern. Fighter for me to watch, man, it is Tony Ferguson. I want to see how he looks coming off an absolute ass beating of a lifetime. His 12-fight win streak was ruined. He was on the cusp of a title shot with Khabib so many times, and here everybody was saying Tony Ferguson's the one to beat Khabib, and it's the same people now saying that Charles Oliveira is going to go out there and beat Tony Ferguson. It makes no sense. I think Tony Ferguson's got something to prove, and I think that's why he took this fight. An excellent night of fights, man, so I hope we can pick up from last week. Another 6-unit night would be excellent. I think we got some great reads on this card, so they will be released later on the week. Make sure to follow us on Twitter where we release the picks, when we're in agreeance about them, and then they'll always be tracked at Bet MMA. I hope you guys are cashing with us. Anything else you want to add?
No, I think you covered it all. I hope, like you said, to kind of continue the streak, it'll be good. I mean, we're up over 30 units this year alone, and we've only been doing it since July. So I hope you guys are cashing with us for real.
Absolutely, man. We'll see you guys next week.
Peace.